This is the Dallas Morning News.
Hello, everybody. Welcome into SportsDay Insider, presented by the Dallas Morning News. I am Kevin Sherrington, joined by my pals Evan Grant and Calvin Watkins, one of our Cowboys insiders. We're going to get right into it here because Calvin can't stay with us very long. He's got a dentist appointment. It's just amazing because you got this big, beautiful smile. I don't see that there's any problem there. Tell your dentist, first of all, that I'm down with whatever you're doing, that it looks all good to me.
Someone told me they thought my teeth were getting a little yellow a couple of weeks ago. So I said, I need to maybe go run to the dentist. So
first of all, what friend would tell you that?
I don't know.
Why? What a terrible thing to say. No.
When I get old, I want to keep my teeth. So that's part of the issue.
That's been the issue with me. I am old and I've kept mine. So that's what's good. All right, let's move on from dentistry to the Cowboys, which is just as painful to watch. Let me just say that. I was out there with you on Saturday night, Calvin, and that was brutal. I mean, we know that preseason games don't mean very much, and boy, the Cowboys better hope so, because that was just a brutal performance all around. They gave Joe Milton the second every opportunity possible in these first two games to make something happen, and it just really hasn't. Other than that 49-yard pass to Jonathan Mingo, if you subtracted that, the rest of it was really pretty dismal. So I guess what I'm going to ask you here, Calvin, is when the Cowboys signed Joe, did they think, well, he's a little rough around the edges here, and this is going to take some time, or were they looking at that one game he played for the Patriots at the end of last season, in which he played very well and a very nice performance overall, and think this is the guy we're getting? Which do you think it is right now?
I think they thought they were getting a little bit of that guy that played in New England in that last game and beat the Bills, right? Even though the Bills had their backups in and the Patriots were trying to lose that game to get the number one overall pick. And Joe Milton, who relieved Drake May, played pretty good in that game and earned them a win. So that they thought that they were getting some of that. They saw him in college. I think he was in college like 12 years or however long it was.
Yeah, 6 years.
6 years. 6 years in college. So it was a combination of that. He's got a great arm. He's got mobility. He's a smart kid, very mature. He's obviously being in college 6 years, I would hope he'd be mature, right? So it was a combination of all those things, and they said, hey, he's on his rookie contract. We got him for 3 more years at a low price. We can develop him into Dak's backup or possibly replace Dak when Dak's contract ends in 3 years. So everything that they did made sense. I was in favor of the trade when they did it this offseason, but it's been a little rough going with Joe from the first day of the offseason workouts to where we are right now.
All right, before Evan wants to ask some questions, overall question, I do want to ask one more thing about the quarterback thing here. And obviously, Cooper Rush had done a great job for the Cowboys. I know fans had gotten tired of him, he's not a great arm, and not a lot of mobility and all of that. And all that's true. But let's just look at the win-loss record. He was 9-5 as a starter for the Cowboys. That is a phenomenal track record. I would put him up there. Now, if you count backup quarterbacks, you got to count Dak Prescott and you got to count Tony Romo just from this century, right? And those guys went on to become really good starting quarterbacks, whatever you may think about them. That was a very successful transition. And Cooper Rush was never going to be that. But to do what you ask him to do, which is to fill in for a guy who over the last 4 years has missed a lot of games, then I think I felt pretty comfortable with the Cowboys doing that. The decision to move on from Cooper basically was based just on economics, right? They thought he was making more than what they wanted to pay, right?
Yeah. Stephen Jones had told one of our colleagues who's now retired, David Moore, he said, we want to draft a young quarterback to develop, right? So you say, well, you have Trey Lance. You traded a 4th-round pick for Trey Lance, right? Remember that? They did that like before the start of the season or whatever that was, end of the training camp rather. And yeah, but we know who Trey Lance is, and we didn't want him. So Cooper Rush signs with Baltimore. He gets a 2-year, $6.25 million deal. $4 million is guaranteed for a backup quarterback. Now he's going to play behind Lamar Jackson, and he knows he's not playing, right? Even though Lamar Jackson puts himself at risk more than Dak Prescott does. The ability for Lamar Jackson to get hurt is higher to me than as Dak Prescott, even though Dak gets hurt every other year. So he'll get hurt next year. So combined, what they're paying Will Grier and Joe Milton with their base salaries going through the 2027 season is $4.39 million. So it's a $2 million difference. Trey Lance signed a 1-year, $2 million deal with the Chargers. So I'm thinking you could have gave Trey Lance that money, right? So some of it was a money thing. Some of it was we've seen Trey Lance. Goodbye. We want somebody else. We'll draft a quarterback. That didn't happen. So they were still looking for somebody. They had Will Grier, who's only thrown 50 passes in the NFL. And then they go, oh, we could get Joey Milton from New England because they're good with Drake May. They don't want 2 young quarterbacks. They want Drake May, as you know, to be the man there. And so they made a trade for Joe Milton, which I think was a good deal. However, you don't talk about backup quarterbacks until you need them. And Cooper Rush was more than a serviceable backup quarterback. He was 9-5, as you said. When Dak fractured his thumb a couple of years ago, Cooper won 4 or 5 games, right? And created a stir that, Cooper can lead the Cowboys to the Super Bowl. Well, he can't, but he's somebody who's serviceable, who can move the ball down the field, and he won't mess it up for you. So that's what you had in Cooper Rush. And as of now, it looks as if the Cowboys made a mistake probably in letting Cooper Rush go over economics.
Yeah. One quick thing here before Evan's questions. To me, in the best of all worlds, and of course this would cost you more money, is that you have Cooper as your backup and you have Joe Milton as your third quarterback, right?
Right.
I mean, that's ideal, but Jerry never wants to spend money on backup quarterbacks. We know that.
Well, but that would represent an actual plan that you would have a guy who could potentially be successful as your backup, and you would have a third quarterback who would be a developmental project that can work and get to know your offense and get to know your personnel without being risked to, real game situations. That would be a plan. And once again, from a casual perspective, I fail to see one on the Cowboys' perspective.
No, I agree. The plan is flawed. I think the plan is flawed.
Yeah, the plan is flawed. Well, we've seen flawed plans before. It's just, Calvin, this is my thing with the Cowboys is that there is no plan. They just goes from year to year. There's no identity in this organization, right? I mean, you can say that obviously Dak Prescott has been through several head coaches now, right? And so there is that, but there's a different plan every year. There's a different, I'm not going to defend Mozzie Smith very much, but because at some point your talent has to take over. And as I told you in the press box the other day, I watched Mozzie on one play, and a guy shoved him from the side, and Mozzie got air. I mean, he got air as he went. The guy just kind of just shoved him, and it was like there's no base here. There's no resistance, and so that's my issue here is that from his standpoint, he's just not got the talent to play in the NFL. I don't think. I think that becomes kind of apparent.
Yeah, but I mean, Kevin, that's a difference, right? I mean, this isn't a value. This was a player who was a first-round talent. It was just a player who hasn't developed, right?
I mean, absolutely. But to your point, the thing is that
quarterback situation. On the quarterback situation, I mean, you've got a quarterback who's in his mid-30s who has been injury-prone. You had a successful. I mean, look, winning 2/3 of your games as a backup quarterback is a pretty important stat to have, especially for a team that has a injury-prone quarterback. And so I don't see a plan. Joe Milton's a talented guy who had a one-game starting audition with New England at the end of last year. But what was the plan there? You're gonna hope that he's gonna develop overnight?
Well, that's my point. Is that I took that Mozzie Smith aside. Is that they keep changing things all the time. There's not an identity. The Steelers year in and year out, this is their identity. This is who they are. You know who it is, and so you draft and develop accordingly. And that to me is the problem with not having an identity. When you're changing that every year, when your defensive coordinator is running something different every year because you got a different defensive coordinator every year, then you're the guys that you draft to play one system no longer work in that system. And so it's difficult to maintain and sustain success and do different things, I think but that's just indicative of what the Cowboys do, as Calvin said.
But
Now, Evan, what did you want to talk about with
clearly, I mean, this is how good this team is, that we're just talking about like whether or not they've got a good backup quarterback, because all the other holes are filled, right?
Well,
no, they are not filled. No.
I mean, that's Calvin. I mean, basically from looking from afar, it seems like as the Cowboys go into this last preseason game, we all know that the last preseason game means even less than the first two.
Mm-hmm.
It feels like nothing has gotten solved. Has anything gotten solved with the Cowboys and their issues in your mind going into this final preseason game?
One thing they did solve. We know who the starting running back is going to be. Javonte Williams is going to be the starting running back week 1 in Philadelphia. That's the only thing we know. They're still trying to find out who the nickel cornerback is going to be. They got a bunch of undrafted kids, Zion Childress and Damon Hall. Damon Hall played at North Texas. So they're trying to figure out who's going to be the slot corner. They lost their starting left tackle, Tyler Guyton, to a fractured bone in his knee. So they got this undrafted kid, Nate Thomas, who played at University of Louisiana. So I think they kind of solved that only because Tyler Guyton is hurt, right? We don't know when Trayvon Diggs is going to come back. And, we don't know if Micah Parsons will be on the field in Philly because he's trying to get $200 million, and Jerry is not trying to give him $200 million right now. So, yes, to answer your question, they have a lot of answers. And, they have a rookie head coach who keeps talking about he's not concerned with anything and he wants to play Marty ball, but he doesn't have the horses to play Marty ball. So a lot of unanswered questions. And before you go, Kevin, you made a valid point about the identity. Mike McCarthy, I think, was trying to build something, right? Because he was here 5 years. But what hurt Mike McCarthy was that he got beaten bad by the Packers in the playoffs in that 4th year. And when you watch the Jerry Jones documentary, Jerry Jones said in the documentary, this was one of the worst losses in franchise history. And he never got over that loss, right? And Jerry needs to get over that loss to say, I'm going to stick with Mike McCarthy here and give him a chance to kind of build something similar to what he did with Jason Garrett. Jason Garrett didn't have as much success as Mike McCarthy, but at least Mike McCarthy can say, I have a Super Bowl ring. So what I'm doing makes some sense, and I can develop some people. So by getting rid of Mike McCarthy and going with Brian Schottenheimer, you're kind of resetting yourself up again for failure or success. But as you guys know, they haven't had much success when they do these types of things. So yes, they don't. Like when I see the Rangers, I understand what they're trying to do, right? I get it.
Even if it fails spectacularly like it has for the last 2 years.
Right, but at least you say, okay, this is the plan. I know what your GM's trying to do, blah, 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 all that. But with the Cowboys, you're like, well, it changes every other year.
Yeah.
Calvin, give me one thing that you think the Cowboys accomplished in training camp and preseason that will serve them well during the regular season. Because from everything I've heard, Javonte Williams may be the starting running back, but it doesn't appear that any of their guys can actually run the ball.
I think the best thing that they've done is George Pickens, who they also acquired in a trade, has been a good kid, hasn't got any trouble. And you could tell with him and CeeDee Lamb that the passing game is going to be pretty good if they can get the ball down the field. So they have 2 dynamic playmakers on offense, which I think is going to be beneficial for them. Someone was telling me last night he thinks the Cowboys might have to average 30 a game to win. And they can do that with Pickens. So to me, the passing game is the number one thing that they got accomplished is that, hey, George Pickens is the truth. Now, he's going to be a free agent after this year, but that's another story for another day. But as of right now, we got George Pickens and CeeDee Lamb. We're going to be pretty good.
You guys feel like this team can pass block well enough?
That's a relative term. Um, they're going to have to. The thing that we've noticed in training camp is that they're getting rid of the ball faster and they're handing things off. They like Cavante Turpin is like 4'2". They're handing the ball off to him in the backfield, right? They're throwing quicker passes to Pickens. They're not taking as many deep shots as we think they want to try in the regular season because Shoddy says, like, let's just get rid of the ball fast and let Pickens, he's a yards after catch guy, make people miss, get the ball down the field. So they like all these gimmicky type stuff. So, and it might work, and I think it will work. So if you get rid of the ball faster, you won't need linemen to hold up, the Eagles pass rush as long.
Calvin, who do you think here might be? Was there going to be any surprise cuts? Do you think? I mean, when you say if there's going to be a surprise cut, it can't be a surprise if you're going to tell us now. But would you predict anything that might happen that'd be surprising like that?
If they cut
like Kevin's fishing for Mozzie Smith answers.
I would say Mozzie Smith would be a surprise cut. If Mozzie Smith plays a lot on Friday night against Atlanta, then that's telling me that they don't know about him. And, you should know about a guy, and you've seen him 3 years.
Right.
So he would be a surprise cut. I would say they would cut Will Greer only because they're going to bring him back to the practice squad. Miles Sanders, who they also acquired in free agency as the number 2 running back, I think they're going to cut him. He had a bone bruise on the back end of training camp, and he kind of lost some steam, if you will, to try to unseat Javonte Williams for the starting job. I would think they might cut Miles Sanders and give Jaden Blue from Texas, who hasn't played in the preseason, they might move him up just to get a little bit younger and quicker on the offense.
Yeah, a guy that couldn't start at Texas, they're wanting him to be a big contributor. I don't have any problem with Jaden Blue. I mean, look, he's got a lot of talent, and Texas used him to catch the ball out of the backfield. But in his last college game, he ran the ball 4 times. So I just think that kind of tells you a little bit about that situation and whether they're going to be able to run the ball. Because as you said, in Marty ball, he wants to run the ball and then he wants to take shots downfield. That's the idea. And so far, the running part hasn't been very impressive in these first 2 preseason games. Is there anybody else that you might see them adding after the cuts, Calvin?
It wouldn't surprise me if they added a defensive tackle. They've done that in the past. You get a veteran defensive tackle in here to kind of help with the run game. They have pass rushers galore. Dante Fowler, Marshawn Nealon. They got Sam Williams. So they got a lot of pass rushers. But you need somebody in the interior. And if you don't think Mozzie Smith is that zero technique, the guy that's going to take on double teams and split them, then you better find someone on the street. And in late August, early September, there's very few guys on the street that you think can make an impact, especially guys who have been cut.
Yeah, there's no question about that. It's interesting to me, and that's what I wrote about after the game the other day, was that you see what the Eagles have invested in their defensive tackles. And, of course, they were in position to take these guys, and they would have been no-brainers. And I think if the Cowboys had been in those positions, maybe they would have done the same thing. But, they took 2 first-rounders in tackles, and those guys have played very well for them and made a big difference. And Jalen Carter, I think, had 10.5 sacks as a rookie. That's pretty phenomenal to get that from a defensive tackle. So and I guess that was going to be interesting to see, because that was what the Cowboys thinking was, well, the Eagles are drafting these defensive tackles and we're going to invest in offensive linemen and try to combat that, which, okay, if that works, then it works. If you get those kind of players, then maybe that's what you do, because certainly they did that in the teens, right? And starting before that, even, with Tyron Smith and then Zach Martin, and then, they built an offensive line, and that was, now I will say, I will give them that. That was their identity to me, was their offensive line. But, you don't always end up with Hall of Famers either, right? Tyron Smith's a Hall of Famer. Zach Martin's a Hall of Famer. Maybe Tyler Smith is on that track now. They really like him. He's been pretty good, but Tyler Guyton didn't work out so well in his rookie season, and we'll see what he does now. I was listening to something on the other day, and it gave the indication that maybe the what the Cowboys were asking Tyler Guyton to do didn't fit his strengths in his rookie season. Do you do you have any indication
block
what's
defensive
that?
ends? Block defensive ends. That's not what he's supposed to do. They don't think that was a good thing. Sorry.
Yeah, well, that's what you would think. It's pretty simple, right? There's a guy out here who's trying to get around you to the quarterback. If you could do that, that would be great. Have you seen anything from Tyler Guyton? I guess, because he hasn't played. Is there any indication that he's getting it any better than he got it last year?
That rookie year was a rough one for him. I don't think the coaching staff thought he was tough enough. They thought he needed to play through some things, and they didn't think he did. He's lost weight in the offseason. He looks a lot better. He looks quicker. His feet are moving a lot better, and that's what you need, that back pedal when someone is charging at you. It's kind of hard to say because that rookie year was so bad, and he didn't even play in the preseason this year, and he gets hurt. And we talked to him on Monday, and someone asked him, "Do you think you have worked enough to be ready to go in a game right now, considering what happened to you last year?" And he said, "Yeah, I feel really good." So that didn't convince me, but he's convinced himself that he's ready to go. But he does look a lot better. He's eating. I think he's not eating pork. He's into nutrition now. So I don't know. We'll see. I'm not very high on anything that anybody says about the Cowboys internally right now. But they're good guys. They are good people. I like him he's a good guy. Like we have this Halloween. I'm sorry, it's Christmas. We wear these ugly Christmas sweaters, right? And Tyler Guyton was really into it with us. He was like, "Oh man, let me know next year. Maybe I'll bring mine." I go, "Cool." He's really he's a nice guy. You can talk to him, but we'll see it as a football player. I have unanswered questions for you.
Maybe he wore that ugly sweater on the field. Maybe he'd be scaring people off. Then that would.
Wait, did you just say I don't see him as a football player?
No. Kevin said that.
No. Look, I give.
Sorry, Evan. I'm sorry.
Of all the potential, I mean, look, the Cowboys are pretty good at recognizing offensive line. I give Will McClay all the credit in the world for that. I mean, when you hit on what they hit on, that's pretty phenomenal. That was, like I said, a couple of Hall of Famers. They got some bad luck with Travis Frederick. He would have been very good if his career could have been sustained. So from that standpoint, they're good. Terrence Steele worked out for 1 year and didn't work out so well the next year. Yeah, I guess that's another question. Has Terrence Steele looked okay?
He's looked okay. Yeah, he looked okay. The interesting thing is when you tear your ACL, when you come back the next year, you're not really 100%. And then 2 years after tearing your ACL, you're supposed to be good to go. And he's looked really good. The same with Javonte Williams. He tore his ACL 2 years ago. So now this is the second year, so they expect him to be like ascending. So we'll see. But yeah, Terrence Steele's look good. He has.
Yeah.
I answered that one. See, he looks good.
That was
happy
good.
about
Yeah.
that one?
Your buddy Joe Hoyt said he could see that. Man, you said the same thing that they would probably cut Miles Sanders, and that so that means that Phil Moffitt. So does Phil Moffitt end up on the active roster? Is he on the practice squad? Where is he?
Your boy Phil, I think he's on the practice squad.
Okay.
The running backs, and you're gonna be surprised. I think they're gonna go light at running back. They're gonna have Javonte Williams. They love Hunter Lepke. I mean, they've been talking about him like he's Moose Johnston. Man, that's crazy. I'm like, oh my God. He made a play. I think we talked about this. It was in the joint scrimmage with the Rams. They're doing the red zone drill. They hand the ball off to him. He's running in the, between the A and B gap, and then he bounces outside. And the running backs coach is like, "Man, I didn't know he could do that. All right, I'm liking this." I'm like, "How you don't know he don't do this?" So anyway, they love Hunter Lepke. He'll make the team. He hasn't really played this preseason that much. And your boy Mr. Blue, who hurt his ankle in training camp, I think they'll have 3 running backs because they got to go heavy on the D line because they got issues there. They probably have to go heavy on the offensive line because of uncertainty with Tyler Guyton and his knee. There's uncertainty at corner. So you got to go light somewhere. So I think they're going to go light at running back because they love Hunter Lepke. They're going to run. They're going to put CeeDee Lamb in the backfield on some plays. Kavate Turpin in the backfield. So they're going to trick it up a little bit in the running game. So, but Phil Maffa, he'll be on the practice squad making $115,000, and Deuce Vaughn, he'll be on the practice squad, and I think Miles Sanders might make the practice squad. So they'll be okay at running back. It's just, they got other issues.
Yeah, Deuce is living on the practice squad.
He's a good kid. We had a good conversation with him about Bronny James. I'm like, because your dad is the assistant scouting director, and everybody thinks that's why you're here. And he goes, yeah, but I've earned my spot, right? So he's another good kid. He's maybe be a motivational speaker or something. Or
Well, his college coach at Big 12 Day said he was as I recall, the best football player he ever had. And I was all for it when they drafted him. I thought, oh, this is great. And boy, it just hadn't worked out that way. I mean, he gets turned around. I think you said this the other day. He takes more big hits than anybody else in the backfield for the Cowboys. It seems like, and that's the whole deal.
4'2". That's why.
Yeah, well, I'm thinking
you get turned around.
Well, I know, but you would think they would miss him. He's so little. That's the whole point of being that little. And he's not. He's little running big. That's the problem. He needs to be. He needs to get that body laid down a little bit more. So anyway,
when he first got here in training camp, the linemen were like they couldn't find him, because he's hiding behind the linemen. But then once they found his behind, then they popped him. So then he was spinning around.
They're finding him all right. That's the problem. He's not lost. They're finding him.
I'm sorry. I feel bad for Evan because he's just not happy with this whole football.
Yeah,
I just find it comical. I mean, the Cowboys to me, the Rangers are a tragedy and the Cowboys are a comedy. So it's there's a good dichotomy here between the two teams in Arlington. As Kevin so well pointed out the other night, that the only thing more stultifying than the Cowboys offense was the one across the street.
Yeah, pretty much. Okay, well, that's going to do it for our Cowboy segment of our podcast today. We appreciate Calvin coming out and talking to us, and we'll be back next week with more Cowboy stuff, and then obviously we'll have a lot better idea of where they're going to be, although I think by the time we take this, they'll still not be the final cuts. Maybe we'll have to wait until next Wednesday to do that so we can figure out who that is. All right, so Calvin, we appreciate it. We'll see you next week. Maybe we'll kick it back to next Wednesday so we can get the final cuts in. That would be good. I think everybody wants to know that. So have a good one, man.
You too. Thank you.
All right, that brings us over to talk about the Rangers, who are in the midst of this week, their most important week of the season, do or die.
Version 17.
Yeah, version 17, yeah. 4 games with the Royals, and then come home and play the Guardians, who both of those teams just happen to be the teams in front of them for that wild card spot.
Well, not for the wild card spot, to be the first team on the outside looking in at this point.
Yes, to be the first. Exactly. So yes, they're the big competition. So they need to do well here. Evan, I think both of you I arrived at the decision that they needed to win 5 of these 7. They're already down 1 as we're taping this. So by the time that this comes out on Wednesday, we will find out whether they have started on the road to correcting that issue against the Royals.
Yeah, and I mean, look, they also need to reverse 2 years worth of an issue. I wouldn't even say a trend here anymore, because I think when you've got 2 years of data that suggests this team does not play well on the road at all, and that they do not play well against good teams, and you've got 4 games on the road and 7 games against teams above 500, you've stacked the deck against you. This is where they found themselves. They say they know their backs are up against the wall, but listen, Kevin, it's just harder and harder for me to see any route to the playoffs for them that makes sense. I mean, they could get hot, but I don't have any feel for anything to me that suggests this is a team that's capable of really going on a sustained run.
Yeah, this they had a nice little run there, but before the trade deadline, and then what's been their record since the trade deadline, Evan?
I think they are 5-10. I think maybe.
Yeah, which is pitiful considering what they got, and of course the things that it just seems like it's just not going to happen. I don't know what it is about the Rangers. Although I was going to use Nate Lowe as an example. It's like Nate Lowe never left because he got DFA'd, of course, by Washington because he just kind of went in the toilet. He's not nearly as good as he had been when he kind of played for the Rangers. So I don't know if there's a contamination issue here that that something that's happening to this team, or as we've said many times, we've talked about that 23 season was just career years for several players, and everything worked out well. And that's what happens when teams win World Series. When you win a World Series, you don't win it because everything went bad,
Right.
and you overcame all that. You win a World Series because everything went right. Everything breaks right for you, and you
Or
get
you
hot.
respond really well to adversity. Yeah, I mean, and there's that's just two different ways of looking at it, right? You lose a player, but somebody else steps in that you didn't expect, or somebody has a career year, or in the case of the Rangers, a handful of players have what appear to be career years because Jonah Heim, Adolis Garcia, um, uh,
Well, Josh
Marcus
Young.
Simeon, uh, Josh Young have come nowhere close to where they were, in 2023.
Yeah. And so you wrote a story and talked to the team president, Chris Young, in which I thought he made a fairly blunt assessment of Josh Young's situation, which was basically the too much volatility in his game.
Yeah,
He can have some hot stretches, but he also has stretches where he's not doing anything offensively. And of course, we all know that there are lots of players. There are players in the Hall of Fame who are streaky, but the other numbers, what I think Chris was talking about, was that they still draw walks, they still get on base. Their numbers don't flatline across the board,
correct. Yeah,
so
I mean that is the thing with Josh, and quite frankly, it's the thing with a number of these players that they don't walk very much and they do chase, and that does. I mean, your assessment flatlining is basically what happens with this offense, and when you've got huge chunks of the offense that do that, um, it's just impossible to build anything together. All of that said, again, last night they had four different situations where they had back-to-back hits, three of them with less than 2 outs, and the Rangers still managed only 3 runs against Kansas City. I don't think this team executes very well. I don't think it has a sense of execution or a good plan for execution. It is just from a observer's perspective, and I can't imagine what it's like for a fan. From an observer's perspective, it's a difficult team to watch because it just seems like situations scream for them to do something, and it's like almost like they don't realize it.
well, I do think in some ways, and we've talked about this the last couple of years. The team was built to slug, right? So if you're built to slug, that does not suggest you are built to be a situational hitter necessarily, right? So if you're looking at it from the standpoint of, well, uh, we're waiting for somebody to hit a 3-run homer, that's a little bit of what they were kind of built to do. Although, to get a 3-run homer, that means somebody has to be on base, and there's not enough of those guys in this lineup. There's not enough guys with a high on base percentage to do that. So I would guess here, if we're going to look ahead a little bit, and knowing Chris Young's impatience, and the fact that Josh Young's not playing now. Look, you're bringing up Cody Freeman and hoping that Cody Freeman's going to do something. And of course, in his first game up, he goes 0 for 4.
I mean, I didn't, and it was, he played on Sunday too. I mean, but the thing here is, to your point, you've brought up a guy who's played 5 big league games and put him into a key position in a key moment, and there's no, to go back to the Cowboys segment, it doesn't smack of a plan. It just smacks of, let's try something else. Let's hope something else works.
Yeah. It doesn't bode well for Josh Jung's long-term future here, I don't think. I mean, I can't imagine what's going through his head. And I'm sure that their feeling is that, look, we've tried to pound this into you that this is what we want you to be, and you are resisting. That's what it says to me, is that it's not like Josh is not a bad guy, but he might be a stubborn guy. And you're not listening to us, and we're trying to send you a message. Here's the message: in the most critical week of the season, we're not going to rely on you
Yeah,
to help get us through.
They Chris said all this stuff during batting practice yesterday, and by the time he was done talking, Josh was back in the clubhouse. And when I got into the clubhouse, we were late getting into the clubhouse after the game. It does not appear the Rangers had a players only meeting, which I don't believe they've had at any stretch here. And by the time we finished with the manager's briefing of the session, Josh was on his way out of the clubhouse, so I didn't get a chance to talk with him last night on Monday. But I do need he does need to address this. I mean, he's at a critical juncture of his time with the Rangers here, and he needs to address whether or not he needs to make some real changes.
So let's just kind of go around the diamond real quick here, Evan, and what we expect no matter what happens this week. I mean, even if they win 5 of 7 this week, that's no guarantee that anything's going to happen, going forward. That's the best of situations at that. And they've not been able to sustain any hot streaks for a very long period of time. So it's pretty 50-50 would be their best shot, I think, if they win 5 of 7. It just means we wouldn't write them off just yet. But if we were looking around here, you've already addressed this situation that Jonah Heim probably won't be back. Adolis Garcia probably won't be back. Of that starting lineup,
let's go around the diamond. Okay, catcher,
yep.
Jonah Heim. I would wager money will not be back. I would not be surprised if the Rangers make a decision before the end of this year and make a move with Jonah Heim. Jake Berger, I think, will be back. He's been obviously hampered by injuries. He's a second half player, had been on a hot streak before this latest injury, but he's also going to go into the first year arbitration and be fairly cheap after this year. Second base, Marcus Semien will be back basically because Marcus is under contract for a lot of money for 3 more years. Shortstop, Corey Seager obviously will be back and is the one regular starter who has basically performed at career norms or close to career norms this year. Third base, I believe Josh will be back even going into his first year arbitration just because he'll be cheap. I don't know that he could be written down as the definite third baseman. That may go to Josh Smith. But I do think the Rangers won't non-tender him. Let's put it that way. Left field, yeah, Wyatt Langford hasn't made a ton of progress this year. I'm going to chalk that up to a sophomore slump, but he's obviously back. Center field, I think you've got Evan Carter, and at this point in time, you view Evan Carter as the strong side of a platoon, facing right-handers, giving him time off against left-handers. He hasn't had a ton of success against lefties, has an injury history there, and so you've got to have a second part of that platoon, which basically makes me say, if I think Wyatt Langford is the outfielder who's going to play every day, and I think he's the guy who has the ability to be my franchise cornerstone, then I want Wyatt Langford in center field, and I don't want him to have to move to center field to accommodate Evan Carter's days off. I'd rather Evan Carter, stay playing left field. Right field, obviously, Adolis will not be back by any stretch, I don't believe. And then you get to DH, and I just wonder, I don't think the Rangers would get rid of Jock Peterson this year, though it's going down as a historically bad year. I think he would get a chance going into 2026. But
that's a player option, though, right?
No, it's well, it's a player option. He could turn it down. You think he's going to turn down $18 million coming off?
Well, that's my whole point. He's not
Yeah.
going to turn it down.
So I think he's back, but I think that, there will be a very short leash there. Now that's all just based on contract status, Kevin. I mean, I think you have to think about what moves could you make to have a more well-rounded offense, and that means you've got to potentially either make some deals or spend some money.
Yeah. I'm just looking over the free agents going into next year, and obviously there's some big names in there. There are guys like Kyle Schwarber and Pete. Alphonse. Golly,
Pete Alonso.
Yeah, Pete Alonso. So there, and there's Real Muto. He's available. Catcher, and so those are big names. Would the Rangers be in the market for names that big and at prices that high?
I don't think that. I'd love for them to get Kyle Schwarber. I think he'd be a great fit for a number of reasons. I also don't know that he's ever going to get out of Philadelphia at this point. And I don't know that they've got the money to spend on him if it's going to cost $30 million. I think Real Muto later in his career might be a 1 or 2 year guy. And he also, for the things that I feel like the Rangers need that go beyond performance on the field in terms of galvanizing a club, I think JT Real Muto could be a guy who could come in here and fill that role on a shorter term deal. I don't see Pete Alonso here. The guy that I'd also have some interest in, though I don't know how you make it work, would be if Bregman opts out in Boston. I'm looking for gritty players at this point in time. I'm looking for guys who are going to come in and make some noise in the clubhouse, because I really do feel like this clubhouse needs a little bit of shaking up. I think this 2023 core has kind of run its course a little bit, and it needs somebody with more, outward edge.
Well, and that's just your point. Everybody talks about Kyle Schwarber's, besides what he brings you offensively, he is a tremendous clubhouse presence. People love him. So, yeah.
Real Muto too. I mean, Real Muto is really considered a great glue guy.
Yeah. So, the thing about this to me is I remember talking to Chris Young in the spring about, Jock Peterson. Oh, what a great guy he is, and how much the people who've been around him, how much they love him. And that's all well and good. And he'd been a good platoon player, obviously, the last couple of years. And then he just bottomed out this year. I think that's the issue going into next season, is that you cannot take the risk that a guy, that the guy, whoever you're going to add to this lineup, well, he's a really nice platoon player. You need to add an impact player at this point. You need to add a guy who has a track record.
This is what he does. A guy who's going to perform, right? Who's going to perform.
Yes. Who's going to perform, because that's the thing. I agree with you. I do think this clubhouse needs something. It's a very dull clubhouse. It was a dull clubhouse, though, in 2023 as well. The difference in this lineup now is that you need to have somebody else who's going to be able to deliver you a key hit, that you got a fairly reasonable belief that he's going to deliver. I mean, Seager is that guy, obviously, right? But Marcus Semien no longer is that guy. There is not another bat in that lineup anymore that you think, yeah, this guy's he's got the potential to deliver right here. Somebody might run into something, but in the past, you had that with Adolis could be that guy. In a short sample size, Evan Carter was that. Wyatt Langford, I guess, Evan, part of my problem with like Wyatt Langford this year is that, and I realize I do believe in sophomore slumps, but his first at bat Monday night, Waka's, he's not a hard thrower. He's a deceptive guy though, and he's a nice pitcher. He does a very good job, but he takes a called third strike fastball, not even on the corner. It's off the corner. It's certainly hittable, and it's like, why aren't you at least trying to protect there? Why are you taking that pitch? It was just like, that made me think, are you a guess hitter now? Is that what you're doing? Because that was not your the book on you. Your book on you was that the great thing about this kid is that, boy, he really protects the plate. And I don't see that as much this year. And that's the thing, to me, that's more disturbing than anything. It's not so much the lack of power or production there. And of course, that's just been team wide. They've got no pop this year. Once again, they failed. They were built to slug and they have not slugged. But the
which
fact
is going,
that
I think it's another, and I plan to write something here, depending on how this week goes, basically on some hard truths the Rangers need to accept as they start to turn towards 26. But I think that's also something that they need to accept, is that this ballpark plays differently than it did in 23. And I think they're going to need to try and build a club that is more able to take advantage of the ballpark than trying to go against the grain. Right? It's not a ballpark that tilts towards slugging. It's a ballpark that tilts towards getting on base and hitting the ball in the gaps. And so I think that's something the Rangers are going to have to take into account.
Yeah, and I don't know how many guys they've got on this team right now who can take advantage of that. Obviously, when Evan Carter's healthy, he can do that quite well, and Wyatt Langford can, obviously. So that's 2/3 of your outfield there. I don't know who ends up playing right field next year. And see, to me, that's the other issue. If there was a guy just knocking on the door, you thought, okay, here's my right fielder.
Well,
right
this is
here.
another hard truth they've got to face, right? That they're very thin in the minor league system at position players. I think they've done a very good job of retooling both how they draft and develop pitchers and how they go out and find pitchers on the market. But the minor league system has not produced position players outside of Wyatt Langford and Evan Carter and Josh Jung were from the minor league system, but they don't have anybody in the system close now, with the exception of potentially Sebastian Walcott, who right now is still a shortstop. And, maybe he's your answer at right field if you're going to keep Corey Seager at shortstop.
Yeah, that was the next question I was going to ask you, Evan. So here's the thing. Sebastian might be ready to play next year. Who knows? Let's say he goes into spring and then all of a sudden, he's a very mature kid and all of that. But isn't there the potential there also, if you're trying to push this kid a little bit, that
I don't think he's ready just yet. I mean, I think that this is a kid who probably needs at least another year, and I don't think that that's slow tracking him or anything like that. But I would think that for a guy to be knocking on the door, he's got to be absolutely torching pitchers at the minor league level, and Sebastian's not doing that. Now, maybe he gets hot and goes off in the last month of the season, but I don't know if that's still enough. I mean, I'd want somebody who comes in, has a long stretch where he is the best player in his league, or one of the 2 or 3 best players in his league performance-wise, before I'm ready to say, okay, this guy's ready to jump from AA to the big leagues.
And to me, he's the only guy who really profiles as a right fielder of their guys that are up at that level, right?
Only guy who's remotely close, yeah.
Yeah, because Alejandro Osuna just hasn't done it for me in the limited, amount of time he's played. And he had a great spring. So what does that tell you?
Well, he had a great spring, and he's had a couple of nice years. But I also think that I didn't go into spring training thinking Alejandro Osuna was going to play in the big leagues in 25, and he's over 100 plate appearances. So,
yeah, there's no question about that. All right, well, that's going to do it for the Ranger segment of our podcast this week. When we come back next week, we'll have a better idea of where they are, whether we're going to write them off completely or whether they are still in the game, still in the hunt. But they got they're up against it at this point. There's no question about that.
This sounded like SportsDay Apocalypse podcast.
Well, it kind of was, wasn't it? Yeah.
Cowboys stink. The Rangers stink.
Yeah, it's not any fun. We'll see. We'll see what happens down the line. So from everybody in here to everybody out there, thanks, and we'll see you next time.